My mother, like her mother before her, and her mother before her, had her first child, me, at 25. She and my father were young and in love. He made up silly songs to make her laugh. He brought her her favorite flowers every payday, spider mums. They worked opposite shifts so that someone could always be with me. After I was born, I was very, very loved and very wanted. At least that's what she tells me. One spring morning, my father kissed my mother and myself goodbye, said he had to run to the bank before work, and simply disappeared. It was a month before they found his body. At 25, she became a mother. At 26, she became a widow. He had been robbed earlier in the year, but gunpoint, and he was set to testify on March 20th. He was kidnapped on March 19th. There were police investigations, arrests, and trials. It's a strange way to grow up, being in the middle of such a thing and yet not, being the victim of a violent crime's fallout. I was too young to remember him, too young to know what was really going on, but it still permeates a great deal of my early memories and feelings. It's as if the pain and the experience is mine, but it's not. It's an emotional and identity purgatory. Do I own this loss? I do, but I don't. Both my mother's and my father's parents seem to think my mom would just give me to them so she could go about the business of being young. And I would like to take this time to publicly thank her for not doing that. It took 3 years for my father's case to see the inside of a courtroom, and the judge in my father's trial decided that the events were too upsetting for the women. So my mother and my grandmother were banned from attending. Sometimes a mother's love is sitting in a courthouse hall every day of a trial waiting for the jury to make the short walk from the courtroom to the deliberation room, She waited there with me so they would see us, so they would know that Thomas Robert Stearns was not just a name, not just a diagram, not just an autopsy report. A mother's love was making sure that my father was known as a beloved husband who was loved and loved his daughter. That is what my mother's strength is made of. When the DA and the sheriff told her that it wasn't safe for us to stay, that we were being threatened, she picked up and moved us all the way across the country, a new widower leaving her family and everyone she knew behind. That is my mother's strength. Her strength is in allowing me to mourn someone I can't even remember, while she remembers him all too well. Her strength was in allowing me to rage as I grew older and I learned more details of his death. Frequently, my rage was aimed at her, warranted or not, mostly not, and she bore it with a spine of steel. We are not a perfect mother-daughter team. There was no idyllic Lorelai, Rory, Gilmore relationship, complete with coffee, banter, and bits. She wrote a book and dedicated it to her dogs. It's true. I was self-destructive. She hid her head in the sand. We were connected, and yet we consistently had our wires crossed. At 19, I told my mother I was going to die if she didn't send me away. I had an eating disorder, and it was out of control, and I was falling apart. She did nothing. A few weeks later, I stood in the examining room of her primary care physician as he told me in no uncertain words, quote, "If she kills herself, it will be your fault." I poured my mother into the passenger seat of the car, and then I somehow marched myself back into his office where I demanded he come to the waiting room, and then I tore him a new one. Me, 19 years old, barely 90 pounds, and terrified of conflict, chewed that grown man up, and I spit him out in front of everyone in the waiting room. A few of his patients left. He apologized. And that I got from her. That is my mother's strength. Maya Angelou says that you do the best you can with what you have, and when you know better, you do better. As a child and a young adult, I could only focus on the ways she failed me. I was angry with her for years, and she took it. As an adult, I can clearly see that the same month I turned 19 and fell apart, the man who took my father's life had his life taken by the state. For her, it was a reopening of old wounds and another round of victimization as his family and friends held court on the news begging for his life and hurling horrible accusations at us. Who were the victims here? For me, it was the first tangible event I had that validated his life and his death. It wasn't just some nightmarish fable. It was new and complicated and horrible. My family, who never spoke of my father or of it, were forced to. The sight of his murderer's children on television speaking about their loss and the 18 years that they had with him while I didn't have one memory of my father was too much for me. I saw them on TV begging for their father's life, knowing that my father had also begged for his life, and their father didn't care. I turned on everyone, especially my mother. And she bore it, even in the midst of all of this, until she couldn't take it anymore. And I blamed her for years. And she let me. That is my mother's strength. But when we know better, we do better. So we do better, she and I. I am no longer the child who can only see her own struggles. I can see my mother's and empathize with them. She wants to move here and be near me and the kids, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see her and have my children know her, even if she does insist on fixing my bra straps. I'm a grown woman with 3 kids. Maybe I like my bra straps twisted. She ever think of that? Maybe they twist because my spine is crooked and we never got it braced. Really, my twisty bra straps are all her fault. I have issues, you guys. I recently had to stand up for my son, and I didn't do it very well. It was messy, and it was awful, and it changed a lot of things in my life. And I'm still not good at conflict. But I am my children's biggest advocate and supporter, and I am fully committed to that. I know better because of her, and all of that strength to stand up and insist on being heard and being strong enough to handle the fallout, that is my mother's strength. That I got from her. I was always afraid to have a daughter. I was worried I'd be a terrible mother for a little girl. I'm embarrassed to say I was terrified I would be jealous of all that she had that I didn't have. And that was so silly. My daughter is now only a few months older than I was when my father was murdered. And I see the way she lights up for her daddy. I see the way she has him beyond wrapped around her little finger. I see the joy she brings him. And I wonder, and I hope, even if I don't remember it, that my daddy looked at me like that. I hope I hope we smiled at one another like my sweet girl smiles at her daddy. I hope we giggled and cuddled and laughed, and I hope I made him happy. And I hope it made my mother as joyous to see it as it does me. I hope I got that from her.